My name is Jack, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a pretty straightforward life. I lived in a cozy suburban neighborhood with my wife, Emily, and our two children, Ethan and Olivia. We had been married for 10 years, and for the most part, life was good. I worked as a project manager for a construction company, which kept me busy, but allowed me enough time to be a present father. Emily was a stay-at-home mom, a role she embraced with open arms after our second child was born. Our house was the epitome of a family home, full of laughter, love, and a few too many toys scattered across the living room floor. We lived in a modest but charming house in a quiet cul-de-sac. Our street was lined with oak trees, their branches creating a canopy that shaded the sidewalk where our kids loved to play. Our neighbors were friendly, the kind who would lend you a cup of sugar or keep an eye on your house while you were on vacation. It was an idyllic setting, the kind you read about in books or see in family sitcoms. Ethan, our oldest, was 8, a curious and energetic boy who loved soccer and had a knack for building intricate Lego structures. Olivia, at 6, was a sweet and imaginative girl who adored her dolls and anything that sparkled. Emily was the glue that held us all together, always there with a warm smile and an encouraging word. She had a way of making our house feel like a home, filling it with the aroma of freshly baked cookies or the sound of her humming as she went about her day. Life seemed perfect on the surface, but, as they say, appearances can be deceiving. Looking back, I can see the cracks that were starting to form in our seemingly perfect life. Little things that didn't quite add up, subtle changes in Emily's behavior, and the growing distance between us. But at the time, I was blissfully unaware, caught up in the daily grind, and trusting that our love was strong enough to withstand any storm. It started with small things, the kind of subtle changes you might not notice if you're not paying close attention. Emily became increasingly absorbed in her phone, always texting or scrolling through social media. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone's glued to their devices these days. But then, she'd abruptly put her phone away when I entered the room, or she'd laugh at a message and quickly change the subject when I asked what was so funny. She also started dressing differently. Emily had always had a casual, effortless style, jeans and a t-shirt, a sundress in the summer. But now she was wearing more makeup, buying new clothes, and even lingerie. When I asked her about it, she said she just wanted to feel good about herself. I was supportive, of course. I wanted her to feel confident and beautiful. But there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, a tiny voice whispering that something wasn't right. Our sex life, once regular and satisfying, became sporadic and mechanical. Emily seemed distant, going through the motions without any real passion. When I tried to talk to her about it, she'd brush me off, saying she was tired or stressed. I chalked it up to the pressures of parenting and running a household. But it still stung. I missed the intimacy we used to share, the closeness that had always been a cornerstone of our relationship. Then there were the late-night phone calls. She'd step out of the room to take them, her voice hushed and secretive. When I asked who it was, she'd say it was a friend or her mother, but something about the way she said it felt off. I started to feel like an outsider in my own home, shut out of a part of her life that she was keeping hidden. One day, I noticed a name that kept popping up on her phone: Michael. It wasn't a name I recognized, but she mentioned him casually a few times, saying he was a friend from high school who had recently gotten back in touch. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I started to see the frequency of their messages and calls. It was more than just catching up with an old friend. My suspicions grew, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I loved Emily and wanted to believe that she would never betray me, but the signs were becoming too hard to ignore. One evening, while she was in the shower, I couldn't resist the urge to look through her phone. I felt a pang of guilt as I unlocked it and scrolled through her messages. There were dozens of texts from Michael, many of them innocent enough. Conversations about their past, mutual friends, and harmless jokes. But then there were messages that made my blood run cold. Flirty exchanges, talks of meeting up, and then, the worst of all, a string of messages that left no room for doubt about the nature of their relationship. My heart pounded in my chest as I read through the texts. I miss you so much, can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about it. I wish I could be with you right now. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, the wind knocked out of me. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, was having an affair. I put her phone back and tried to act normal. But inside, I was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion. How could she do this to me? To us? What did I do wrong? I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I needed more proof. I needed to be sure before I accused her of something so serious. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention to her behavior. Every time she smiled at her phone or made an excuse to leave the house, my suspicions grew. I started to feel like a detective in my own home, piecing together clues and trying to make sense of the chaos. It was a dark and lonely place to be, trapped in a web of doubt and mistrust. But I had to know the truth. And so, I waited, watching and gathering evidence, preparing myself for the inevitable confrontation that would change our lives forever. The day everything came crashing down is etched in my memory like a scar. Emily had told me she was going out to run some errands, a typical Saturday routine. But something about the way she was acting, the nervous energy, the extra time she spent getting ready, set off alarm bells in my mind. I had a gut feeling that today was the day I would get my answers. After she left, I decided to follow her. I felt a pang of guilt and shame for stooping to such measures, but I needed to know the truth. I grabbed my keys and trailed behind her car, keeping a safe distance. She drove through town, making a few stops that seemed legitimate: grocery store, dry cleaner. But then she took a turn onto a less traveled road, heading towards the outskirts of town. My heart pounded in my chest as I continued to follow her. We ended up in a secluded area, a small, deserted parking lot near a nature reserve. It was a place we used to go when we first started dating, a quiet spot away from prying eyes. Seeing her pull into that familiar place filled me with a mix of nostalgia and dread. I parked a distance away and watched as another car pulled up beside hers. My blood ran cold when I saw who stepped out. My brother, Michael. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. How could it be him? The messages on her phone flashed through my mind, and everything clicked into place. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. I watched in disbelief as Michael walked over to Emily's car. She got out, and they embraced, their kiss lingering far too long for it to be innocent. I felt like I was going to be sick. My brother, my flesh and blood, was the one she was having an affair with. It was a double betrayal, hitting me from both sides. I couldn't just sit there and watch them. My anger boiled over, and I found myself getting out of my car and walking towards them. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't notice me until I was almost upon them. "Well, isn't this cozy?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm and fury. Emily and Michael jumped apart, their faces a mix of shock and guilt. "Jack, what are you doing here?" Emily stammered, her eyes wide with fear. "I should be asking you that," I spat back, "but I think it's pretty obvious what's going on here." Michael stepped forward, trying to play the peacemaker. "Jack, listen. It's not what you think." "Don't even try," I cut him off. "I know exactly what this is. How long has this been going on? How long have you two been sneaking around behind my back?" Emily burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Michael just stood there, looking ashamed but also defiant. "Jack, I'm sorry," he said. "We never meant for it to go this far." I felt a surge of rage and betrayal. "Never meant for it to go this far? You didn't think about that when you started fucking my wife, did you?" My words were harsh, but I didn't care. They needed to feel the pain they had caused me. Emily tried to reach out to me, but I stepped back. "Don't," I warned. "Just don't." Michael tried to speak again, but I silenced him with a look. "You," I pointed at him, "are not my brother anymore. As far as I'm concerned, you're dead to me." Turning to Emily, I felt a wave of sorrow mixed with my anger. "And you," I said, my voice breaking. "How could you do this? To me, to our family?" Emily sobbed harder, unable to form words. I took a step back, shaking my head in disbelief. "I hope it was worth it," I said quietly before turning and walking back to my car. I couldn't be there anymore. I needed to get away from them, from the scene of my life's greatest betrayal. As I drove away, my hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The image of them together, in our special place, was seared into my memory. The betrayal was complete, and there was no going back. The life I thought I had, the love I believed in, was shattered beyond repair. The days following my discovery were a blur of anger, pain, and a burning desire for retribution. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, their betrayal playing out on a loop in my mind. The thought of them carrying on as if nothing had happened, while I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life, was unbearable. I knew I couldn't let them get away with it. They needed to feel the consequences of their actions. One night, as I lay in bed, the idea of revenge took root in my mind. It wasn't enough to confront them. They needed to pay for what they had done. I began to devise a plan, something that would hit them where it hurt, but wouldn't be easily traced back to me. I knew it was a dangerous path to go down, but my need for justice outweighed my caution. Emily's car was her pride and joy, a sleek silver SUV that she treated better than anything else. Michael had a sports car, a flashy red convertible that he loved to show off. They both deserved to feel the sting of loss, the way they had made me feel. I spent days planning, figuring out how to damage their property without getting caught. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. This had to be perfect. I decided to strike when they least expected it. Late one night, under the cover of darkness, I set my plan into motion. Wearing dark clothes and gloves, I drove to Emily's house first. Her car was parked in the driveway, gleaming under the dim light of the street lamp. I parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, my heart pounding in my chest. I approached her car carefully, looking around to make sure no one was watching. Using a small, sharp tool I had brought with me, I punctured all 4 tires. The sound was barely audible in the still night air. Next, I took out a small container of sugar I had brought and poured it into the gas tank. I knew it would ruin the engine, causing costly damage that wouldn't be easily traced back to me. Finally, I scratched deep grooves into the paintwork, marring the once pristine surface. As I stood back to admire my handiwork, a twisted sense of satisfaction washed over me. This was only the beginning. I left quickly, making sure to leave no trace of my presence. My next stop was Michael's house. I repeated the process with his car, puncturing the tires, sugar in the gas tank, and deep scratches along the body. His car, once a symbol of his arrogance, was now a mess of deflated tires and ruined paint. With my revenge complete, I felt a dark sense of accomplishment. They would wake up to find their prized possessions in ruins, a small taste of the pain they had inflicted on me. As I drove home, a part of me felt guilty for stooping to such measures, but the larger part of me felt justified. They had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now they would pay for it. The next morning I waited for the fallout. I knew it wouldn't be long before I heard from Emily. Sure enough, my phone buzzed with a flurry of messages and calls from her, each one more frantic than the last. I didn't answer. I wanted her to feel the panic, the confusion, the helplessness. She had brought this on herself. Michael's reaction was equally satisfying. He called me, his voice full of rage and frustration. "Jack, I know you had something to do with this. My car is trashed, and so is Emily's. What the hell did you do?" I kept my voice calm and measured. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Michael. Maybe it's karma catching up with you." "You son of a bitch!" he yelled. "This isn't over, Jack. You can't just—" I hung up before he could finish. Hearing his anger, his desperation was a small victory. They were beginning to understand the consequences of their actions. I knew this wouldn't fix the betrayal or heal the wounds, but it gave me a sense of control, a way to channel my anger into something tangible. Over the next few days, Emily and Michael scrambled to repair the damage. Their insurance claims were complicated, their expenses mounting. They were forced to face the reality of their actions, the cost of their betrayal. Meanwhile, I began to plan my next move, the confrontation. It was time to face Emily and demand the truth, to hear her justifications and lay bare the depth of her deceit. The revenge had given me the strength I needed, the clarity to move forward. I wasn't done yet. There was still much to uncover, and many more truths to be told. The confrontation would be the next step in this painful journey, a necessary confrontation to bring closure to the chaos that had taken over my life. I knew the time had come to confront Emily. The damage to her car had shaken her, and I could tell she was on edge. She had been calling and texting me incessantly, each message more desperate than the last. But I wasn't ready to speak with her yet. I needed to gather my thoughts, to prepare myself for the emotional storm that was about to hit. I decided to confront her at home, where we could have the privacy to air everything out. The kids were at school. giving us the perfect opportunity. I texted her, telling her I was coming over and that we needed to talk. Her reply was immediate and anxious. "Jack, please, we need to sort this out. Come over and we can talk." When I arrived at the house, Emily was waiting for me at the door. She looked worn out, her eyes puffy from crying. She tried to reach out to me, but I stepped back, keeping a distance. "Jack, please, come inside," she said, her voice trembling. I followed her into the living room, the place where so many happy memories had been made. Now, it felt like a battlefield. We sat down on opposite ends of the couch, a chasm of pain and betrayal between us. "Why, Emily?" I began, my voice cracking. "Why did you do it? Why him?" She looked down, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I never meant for it to happen, Jack. It just did. Michael and we reconnected, and things got out of hand." "Reconnected? Out of hand?" I repeated, incredulous. "That's your excuse? You were having an affair with my brother. How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, then sighed. "A few months. It started when we met at that family reunion. We started talking, and one thing led to another." I felt a surge of anger. "A few months? You've been lying to me, deceiving me for months? How could you do that to me, to our family?" Tears streamed down her face. "I know I hurt you, Jack, but I was lonely. You were always working, and I felt neglected. Michael was there for me, and I made a terrible mistake." "Lonely?" I snapped. "Neglected? I was working to provide for this family, to give you and the kids a good life. And this is how you repay me?" She sobbed harder, but I wasn't finished. "And what about Michael, my own brother? Did you even think about what this would do to me? It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered. "We never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said, my voice cold. "You hurt me more than you can imagine. And now you have to live with the consequences." Emily looked up, her eyes pleading. "Jack, please. I love you. I want to fix this. I want to make things right." "Love?" I laughed bitterly. "You call this love? You've shattered our marriage, our family. How do you expect to fix that?" She reached out to me, but I pulled away. "It's too late, Emily. The damage is done. I can't trust you anymore. I can't live like this." "What do you want me to do?" she cried. "I'll do anything." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. "I want a divorce, and I want full custody of Ethan and Olivia. You can have visitation, but they need stability. They need to be with someone they can trust." Emily's face crumpled, and she fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, Jack, don't do this. Don't take the kids away from me." I stood up, feeling a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "You should have thought about that before you betrayed me. This is the path you chose, Emily. Now you have to face the consequences." As I walked towards the door, she called after me, her voice breaking. "Jack, please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling, anything. Just give me a chance." I turned back, looking at the woman I once loved, now a stranger. "There's nothing left to work through, Emily. You destroyed everything we had. I hope it was worth it." I left the house, her sobs echoing behind me. The confrontation had given me some closure, but the pain was still raw. I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, but the road ahead was long and filled with uncertainty. The next step was to initiate the divorce proceedings and ensure that my children were protected from the fallout of this betrayal. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with a message from Michael. I didn't want to talk to him, but I knew I had to. I pulled over and opened the message. "Jack, we need to talk. Please give me a chance to explain," I replied tersely. "There's nothing to explain, Michael. You and Emily made your choices. Now you both have to live with them." His response was quick. "I'm sorry, Jack. I never meant to hurt you. Can we at least meet and talk?" I hesitated, then agreed. "Fine. Meet me at the old park at 4 p.m. I arrived at the park early, the memories of our childhood playing in my mind. Michael showed up a few minutes later, looking disheveled and guilty. We stood in awkward silence for a moment before he spoke. "Jack, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I never meant for this to happen." I glared at him, my anger simmering just below the surface. "You never meant for it to happen? You were screwing my wife, Michael. How could you do that to me? He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I don't know, it just happened. We got close and I lost control. Lost control? I scoffed. That's your excuse. You destroyed my marriage, my family, because you lost control. You make me sick. Jack, please, he pleaded. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to make things right. I'll do whatever it takes. I shook my head, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. There's nothing you can do, Michael. You've ruined everything. I don't want anything to do with you. As far as I'm concerned, you're not my brother anymore. He looked devastated, but I couldn't find it in me to care. He had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and there was no coming back from that. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, a broken man. The confrontation had been cathartic, but it hadn't erased the pain. I knew the road to healing would be long and arduous, but I was determined to move forward. The next step was to finalize the divorce and start building a new life for myself and my children. It wouldn't be easy, but I had to believe that better days were ahead. The days leading up to the divorce trial were a blur of legal paperwork and emotional turmoil. My lawyer, Samantha, was relentless in her pursuit of ensuring I got full custody of Ethan and Olivia. I was grateful for her tenacity and support during this difficult time. I spent my days juggling work and meetings with Samantha, and my nights trying to comfort my children, who were struggling to understand why their family was falling apart. Emily had tried several times to reach out to me, leaving long, tearful messages on my voicemail, begging for another chance. But I couldn't bring myself to listen to them. The betrayal was too deep, and the trust too shattered. I focused on preparing for the trial, knowing that securing full custody of my children was the most important thing. On the morning of the trial, I woke up feeling a mixture of anxiety and determination. I had prepared myself for this moment, but the reality of facing Emily and Michael in court was daunting. I got dressed, had a quick breakfast with the kids, and then headed to the courthouse with Samantha. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the warmth and comfort of home. Emily sat on the opposite side of the room, looking pale and exhausted. Michael was there too, seated a few rows behind her. I avoided eye contact with both of them, focusing instead on the task at hand. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, called the court to order, and the proceedings began. Samantha presented our case with clarity and conviction, highlighting the evidence of Emily's affair and the impact it had on our family. She argued that the children needed stability, and that I was the best person to provide it. Emily's lawyer tried to counter, painting her as a devoted mother who had made a mistake but was committed to her children. Emily took the stand, tears streaming down her face as she pleaded for joint custody. She talked about how much she loved Ethan and Olivia, and how she couldn't bear to be separated from them. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. I talked about the betrayal, the impact it had on me, and my determination to provide a stable and loving home for our children. I emphasized that while I wanted Emily to be a part of their lives, their primary residence should be with me. After hours of testimony and cross-examination, the judge called a recess. We all stepped out of the courtroom, the tension palpable. I paced the hallway, my mind racing with what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. Samantha tried to reassure me, but the outcome was far from certain. Finally, we were called back in, and the judge delivered her verdict. She granted me full custody of Ethan and Olivia, with Emily receiving visitation rights. The relief that washed over me was immense, but it was tinged with sadness. This wasn't a victory, but a necessary step to protect my children. As we left the courtroom, Emily approached me, her eyes red and swollen. "Jack, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up, but I love our kids. Don't shut me out of their lives." I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "Emily, I want what's best for them. They need stability right now, and that's what I'm going to give them. But I won't shut you out. You can still see them, be a part of their lives. But things are going to be different." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Jack. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you." We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between us. Then, without another word, I turned and walked away, my mind focused on the future. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjusting to our new reality. The kids struggled with the changes, but with time and patience, we began to find a new rhythm. I made sure to keep them busy with activities and outings, trying to fill the void left by the upheaval in their lives. Emily visited regularly, and while our interactions were strained, we managed to maintain a semblance of civility for the sake of the children. I couldn't forget the betrayal, but I had to find a way to coexist with her for Ethan and Olivia's sake. One evening, after dropping the kids off at Emily's for the weekend, she asked if we could talk. I was hesitant, but agreed, knowing that we needed to find a way to move forward. We sat on the porch, the cool evening air a welcome contrast to the tension between us. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "Jack, I know I've said this before, but I'm truly sorry. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to make amends. I want to be a better mother and a better person." I nodded, the anger and hurt still simmering beneath the surface. "I appreciate that, Emily, but it's going to take time. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight." She looked down, tears glistening in her eyes. "I understand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past hanging heavy between us. Finally, I stood up, ready to leave. "Good night, Emily." "Good night, Jack," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. As I drove home, I felt a sense of closure. The journey wasn't over, but I had taken the first steps towards healing. The trial had been a turning point, a chance to start anew. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was determined to face them head-on, for the sake of my children and myself. The next chapter of our lives was just beginning, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The kids and I moved into a new house across town. It was smaller than our old home, but cozy and perfect for the three of us. We quickly made it our own, filling it with new memories and a sense of hope for the future. I decorated the walls with family photos, ensuring that Ethan and Olivia felt surrounded by love and stability. Adjusting to our new life took time. Ethan and Olivia struggled with the separation from their mother, but I did my best to create a nurturing environment for them. We established new routines, movie nights on Fridays, game nights on Saturdays, and lazy Sunday mornings filled with pancakes and cartoons. Slowly but surely, we found our rhythm. Emily continued to visit regularly. Our relationship remained strained, but we managed to keep things civil for the sake of the kids. It wasn't easy, but we made it work. I had made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate any more deceit or betrayal, and she seemed to understand the gravity of her actions. The support of friends and family was invaluable. My parents were a constant source of strength, always there to lend a helping hand or a listening ear. My brother, Robert, stepped up in a big way, helping me navigate the challenges of single parenthood and offering much-needed advice. His support was a reminder that not all family bonds were broken. I also reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with during the chaos of the past few years. They welcomed me back with open arms, providing a sense of community and belonging that I had sorely missed. I started attending social events again, slowly rebuilding my social life and finding joy in the simple pleasures of friendship. One afternoon, I took the kids to the park. It was a sunny day, and the park was bustling with families. As Ethan and Olivia played on the swings, I found myself reflecting on how far we had come. Despite the pain and betrayal, we were beginning to heal. Our new life was taking shape, and I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. While watching the kids, I noticed a woman sitting on a nearby bench reading a book. She glanced up and smiled at me, and I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time: interest. Her name was Sarah, and she was at the park with her niece and nephew. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself drawn to her warmth and genuine kindness. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I began to spend more time together. She was understanding and patient, never pushing me to move faster than I was comfortable with. Our relationship developed naturally, grounded in mutual respect and shared experiences. Sarah was a breath of fresh air, a reminder that life could still hold unexpected joys. Introducing Sarah to Ethan and Olivia was a significant step. I was nervous about how they would react, but to my relief, they took to her immediately. Sarah was wonderful with them, always patient and kind, and she quickly became a positive presence in their lives. For the first time in a long time, I felt like our family was complete. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Sarah turned to me and smiled. "You know, Jack, you're doing an amazing job with the kids. They're lucky to have you." Her words touched me deeply. "Thank you, Sarah. I couldn't have done it without your support." Life continued to move forward, and with each passing day, the wounds of the past began to heal. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made and to let go of the anger and resentment that had held me captive for so long. I focused on building a future for my children, one filled with love, stability, and new opportunities. One sunny afternoon, as I watched Ethan and Olivia playing in the yard, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Our journey had been tumultuous, but we had come out stronger on the other side. We had built a new life, one that was filled with hope and promise. I had learned valuable lessons along the way about trust, resilience, and the importance of surrounding oneself with people who truly care. I had discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed, and I had found a love that was genuine and unwavering. As I looked at Sarah, who was sitting beside me, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had been a beacon of light during my darkest days, and together we had created something beautiful. Our future was bright, and I was excited to see where it would lead. The pain of betrayal had given way to healing and growth. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, creating a home filled with love and laughter. The journey had been arduous, but it had also been transformative. I was no longer defined by the past, but by the strength and resilience that had carried me through. As the sun set on that perfect day, I knew that the best was yet to come. I had found my way back to happiness, and I was ready to embrace the future with open arms. My children, my new partner, and the life we had built together were all testaments to the power of love, forgiveness, and the unyielding spirit of the human heart. Our story was one of redemption and renewal, a reminder that even in the face of profound betrayal, it is possible to rise again, stronger and more determined than ever. And as we sat together, a family united by love and hope, I knew that we had found our way home.